Hello, everyone. For the people that have already seen me talk today, it's me again. It's a little bit different, though. I'm Tom. I'm one of the co-founders of Iceni Earth, and we're creating a digital platform to restore the natural world. When I was a kid, I started working on farms from the age of 13, and I would go home where my mum was an ardent conservationist, a real environmentalist. So I was working on these kind of commercial farms on my weekends and in the summer holidays, and then going home to watch David Attenborough documentaries. So the conflict of land use kind of started then. I ended up, until just over a year ago, working at the United Nations, and I was based down in Rome. I was actually kind of helping, to some degree, helping organize events like at COP26. And I came across a real problem. I came across a lot of statistics every day. The one that stuck in my head and really forced me to get out of my bubble was that one at the top there. So only 2% of companies that have an environmental commitment can track it down to the farm level. Now, we've heard a lot of talk today about the climate emergency, biodiversity loss. Does anybody think that 2% of companies tracking their impact is enough in this room? To me, it wasn't. So that was my shock to the system. And what I did is called my big brother, who's probably watching right now, who's an award-winning app designer, and I said, can we just do something about this? Seems really important. He said, yeah, sure, let's do something. Why, as we were kind of working through this, we got into why. Why is this such a difficult number? Why is it, what's happening? And there's an element of political will, and there's an element of disconnected supply chains, but really it's an element that no one's building anything for people on the ground. It's very top-down, nobody's building. There are now, but there wasn't close to a year ago. Solutions that are scalable for traceability, where you engage farmers and you engage landowners in the process. It's quite difficult to measure. You've got to bring them on board, bring them with you. But those industries need data. The lack of ground-level data stops the $8 trillion we need to restore nature, which is a third of our response to climate change. By the way, if you invest around 8 trillion in nature, you get about 10 trillion back in business returns. So it's not just about kind of, it's actually kind of jobs and it's income for people based on nature restoration and improvement of biodiversity. Anyway, that's about the problem. There's another element to this, which is why now. Obviously, we've got less than 10 years to solve all these crises. But things are moving, and I think that's the kind of positive message that the ambassador was kind of mentioning earlier. Right now, things are shifting in Scotland and also the rest of the UK and Europe too. So the carbon offset market in 2020 was around 229 billion, and 90% of that is traded in Europe, which is massive. And we're starting to all care about this. But there's other things that are practically trying to remove the barriers here. Some of them are listed on the screen. Some of them actually came out from the conference this week. But again, there's still a challenge of data. There's still a challenge of implementation. Even Jeff Bezos, announced something recently about restoring nature, his big nature fund. So if Bezos can do it, I think we can all kind of get on board. Our solution to this is that it's a user-friendly, intuitive solution for people on the ground. Essentially, in a nutshell, it's an app, right? It's a digital platform that consists of an app and a website portal. What we enable farmers and landowners to do is to understand nature, to measure it, to account for it in their daily decisions, and to share that data with who they need to. It might be a government, it might be their supplier, it might be consumers who are buying from them. It might be for carbon credits or biodiversity offsets or something like that, some sort of green incentive from the private and the public sector. Staying true to that core purpose at the start, data on nature is being used now to inform business decisions. So we enable the supply chain to take that call, to integrate nature into what they're doing, to understand their risk, to do initiatives that are designed to improve it, and help them monitor, disclose, not just to their shareholders and investors, but to their consumers. 55% of people across the country have chosen a brand because of their environmental values. So it's a market force right now, but there's still that lack of data. This is a massive market. So the figure here is, I say global, but really it's US, UK, and Europe combined. Undoubtedly, there's opportunities outside of that. In the UK, it's around 3.3 billion as a total addressable market, and that's around 40,000, something like that, businesses a year looking to understand this data. And that's what we're targeting. And it might be, some of those are governments, some of those are land developers, some of those are people managing natural capital, but it's all based on ground level information. This is essentially our vision. I'm not going to take too long, much longer, but this is essentially our vision, a platform that is, at its core, is about understanding what's happening on the ground. It's a ground truthing solution, and connecting that data to various different objectives and initiatives that have to happen across multiple sectors. There's some capabilities, for example, governments are looking to kind of nudge good behavior. Supply chains are looking to measure their impact, but also there's the financial sector who are looking to de-risk their impact as well. There was a comment earlier about, what's next. Well, the people's advocate who spoke at the start of COP26 said this, and I think that fits our view pretty well. We imagine a world where landowners can gain more by building diverse habitats than by destroying them. And that's what we're here to achieve. So, thanks.
Thanks, Tom. And I know some of the background to this, but you're working with farmers in Scotland. Tell us how so they've got the app and then they're going out into their farmlands and monitoring and selecting. So and what's been the feedback about that? So why would farmers care, and what's the impact you're starting to see?
So I think we've got around 28,000 hectares which are being managed using our app now through our work with Nature Scot. And farmers are actually kind of using the app. We're recommending management advice and improvement, and they're ticking it off, ticking off the list, so we can actively say that our app is contributing to the restoration or improvement of biodiversity. Essentially how it works is the farmer would go out, they look at what habitats they have, they assess their hedges, their woodland, their peatland, their grassland, whatever, and they move through a kind of ecological assessment, and we nudge advice on the other side so that they could improve it. We've really focused on the user testing side of things. So we continuously do user testing, but it's really interesting because the group of farmers, particularly in Scotland, they tend to be a little bit older. I hope they don't mind me saying that, but they tend to be a little bit older and not so kind of technologically savvy. So we really led with that. We really led with designing with them. We collaborate with them. We prototype with them directly. So we're building something for farmers that can help the rest of the supply chain take action on it as well.
And but it's interesting. But you see the kind of their attitudes changing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because this comes to the core of, it's about how you're nudging people.
Yeah.
To different behaviours.
So there's a lot of kind of I suppose from the outside world, there's a lot of kind of perceptions of farmers that they're not interested in this and they don't want to do that. Well, smaller farmers tend to value biodiversity and nature a lot more, but nobody really builds a commercial product for them. And I think that's a real challenge that the agri-tech space has. But they're coming to us now. So they're coming to us to recommend features. They're coming to us to recommend what they need. They're shaping our product roadmap better than we ever could. So we work in partnership very closely with them and respond to what they tell us, basically. We're building for the market, so, yeah.
Thank you. Todd, I saw you raised your hand. Could you have a microphone there, please? Well, hang on, wait. Well, just so we can get it on.
If I could just ask, because it's not clear to me, who the customer is and what is the revenue model?
Okay, so it's enterprise software essentially for the supply chain, for public sector to understand data on the ground. When we progress into the future and we're thinking more about biodiversity or nature credits, it's a transaction fee on those nature credits for us, which is pretty standard in the industry right now. Not so much standard for biodiversity and nature, more standard for carbon across the world. But we also have this other stream where if really progressive policy is in place where you're mandating certain sectors like land developers to understand nature and offset that, but we have a product that enables them to do that, and we have an advanced version of that where you could essentially scenario plan land use. So for example, if you wanted to build 10 houses on a certain site, we could tell you how much biodiversity and carbon you're going to lose based on that process. And then if you wanted to offset to local landowners, which is the best way to achieve a restoration of biodiversity, we can help you do that too. So there's this kind of product model for that sector, and then there's the data model for people who need that access but don't currently have it. I hope that answers the question well enough.
But just as a follow-up to that, if you think about this, so this is today, these past 2 days at COP have been around kind of the finance ministers have been here. So what financial mechanisms do you see, or would you hope to see coming through that would benefit?
So I think there's a combination of things. We need to kind of recognise that the private sector has to pay for something here. It shouldn't always just come out of the public purse. There's a risk to any development, any infrastructure, anything we're building that you're not valuing nature properly, and you should integrate that into your development, right? The challenge of that is when you're building and you're trying to advance something, it's really difficult to do because you're physically changing the space. So how do we create a mechanism where you can have hyper-local offsets? So if I'm building something that's on the outskirts of Edinburgh, how do I make sure farmers in East Lothian benefit from that? Or if I'm building something on the outskirts of Milan, then it's in Italy, for example, it's farmers around there should benefit from that because they're probably impacted by the construction and the development of that. Their land is probably affected. But also they have the most to gain from improving biodiversity. They will be more resilient. Farms are more resilient with biodiversity. There's also about how we look at the kind of public sector payments and farm subsidies and how we transition that to a more outcome-based approach, which I think part of our work with Nature Scot is about. And yeah.
Well, I think you just touched on this. So someone posted on Slido, how do you connect biodiversity to climate change targets, which sort of connects with what you're saying there?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about natural capital, right? So the more biodiversity we have, the more resilient our ecosystems are, which means that the better we can sequester carbon and, the more resilient our infrastructure can be to floods, heat waves, everything like that. I'm kind of generalizing it a little bit because I don't want to take up too much more time of anyone else, but that's the logic in a nutshell, I suppose.
Well, Tom, it's great. It's a fascinating subject, and best of luck with your continued work with the Scottish Government in this area. So, Tom Woolnough from Iceni Earth. Thank you very much.